And welcome back to the show, everybody. Well, last week, Indiana Governor Mike Pence signed into law a bill that said the state can't, and we quote, substantially burden, unquote, the religious freedom of people, businesses, and associations in the state. Red flags quickly emerging from there as critics believe the law would allow legal discrimination against homosexuals. Governor Mike Pence defending the law on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
So was it a mistake to sign this law?
Absolutely not. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed into federal law by President Bill Clinton more than 20 years ago, and it lays out a framework for ensuring that a very high level of scrutiny is given anytime government action impinges on the religious liberty of any American.
And then the conversation switching to a discussion about tolerance.
Is tolerance a two-way street or not? I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk about tolerance in this country today having to do with people on the left. But here Indiana steps forward to protect the constitutional rights and privileges of freedom of religion for people of faith and families of faith in our state. And this avalanche of intolerance that's been poured on our state is just outrageous.
Stephanopoulos then asked the governor if he would add sexual orientation as a protected class to quiet critics.
One fix that people have talked about is simply adding sexual orientation as a protected class under the state civil rights laws. Will you push for that?
I will not push for that. That's not on my agenda, and that's not been an objective of the people of the state of Indiana.
So after all of that, Indiana's Republican legislative leaders are now saying they're working on adding language to a new state law to make it clear that it does not allow discrimination against gays and lesbians. Heather Pence ignored answering whether the law is discriminatory or not against those particular groups. Would you add that language into here, or does it stand by itself?
I don't think so. I think that you've got to have more trust for the system and for juries. These laws have not been tested, and the law is much bigger than gay rights and gay people. You know, if a Catholic person, a Catholic company, printed church bulletins, and someone came to them and said, and this is actually occurring somewhere in the world, I'm having this bowling for abortion to raise money for abortion, and I want you to print these flyers up. That person should have the right to say, no, that is against my religion and I'm not going to do so. That's what this law covers. There are other people who truly, truly believe that they will be violating their true religious beliefs by doing things not for certain people, but for certain acts. So a woman who was a florist and provided flowers for a gay couple for years, but when they got married, refused to provide flowers for their wedding, has now been sued by the state in Washington. This protects against that. When people have serious beliefs, their beliefs should be protected under our First Amendment.
Rick, you wrote about this today.
I did, and I mean, Heather did actually a good job of laying it out. It's so complicated to understand what this law is really about, and I'm not just self-promoting. I really do recommend you go read this piece at Forbes.com, because I think it'll help you to have a better understanding. The basic issue here, Governor Pence mentioned that Bill Clinton had signed this into law in the federal case.
Chuck Schumer co-sponsored it, by the way.
Well, actually, Chuck Schumer sponsored it in the House, and Senator Ted Kennedy sponsored it in the Senate. So this was obviously a liberal type of a bill.
President Obama was involved as well years later.
When he was a state senator,
right,
he voted for similar legislation. But here's the difference. As Bill Clinton points out when he talked about this bill, it was about government, and Mike Pence said that. It spoke to the government. What changes in Indiana is that it takes it just from government action, where the government is trying to get you to do something that could violate your religious beliefs, to a private action, which takes you into the case of the baker who refuses to bake that cake for a gay wedding. So there are many levels of complication here. Where I disagree with Governor Pence is I do think he'll find by the end of the week LGBT people will be included as a protected class.
Why don't they do what they just did in Texas, which is create a carve-out for civil rights legislation and laws, so that they're not standing in the way of and not obstructing federal laws. I don't understand what people get out of compelling someone to do business with somebody else.
Well,
because it ultimately is the businessman or woman's fine.
But would you have said that? Would you have said that back when we were getting civil rights legislation, when people wouldn't let black people sit at the lunch counter?
No, I agree. It's a delicate. No, it's a really, really delicate line. I agree. Look, there was a case of Muslims in Minnesota who wouldn't pick up people who were blind
That's
with
right.
dogs,
That's
who
right.
were carrying liquor they bought at a customs office because they didn't want to transport any of that stuff. They
This
were
is
compelled by the
very
court
tricky
to
stuff.
have
Let
to
me
do
let me
it.
change gears out of the legalese and the tricky stuff
Yeah.
because we're in the weeds. Is this a 2016 battlefield issue now, Rick Unger?
I don't think so, because very few people are going to understand it, and it's actually going to affect very few people's lives.
I think that's true, but it gets people's emotions really high, so it may well be.
I think it might be because the rhetoric is just so hot and intense, and all you have to do is go on Facebook. To
A lot of it will also depend on whether the states, right now it's pending in Arkansas
Yep.
and
It's
Georgia.
there.
Okay.
We'll see what happens there.
And we'll leave it there. Certainly a hot topic. Coming up next, it's potluck time. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV.